Hey, we're building a boat over here. Are you interested? All right. Good morning and welcome. So, exciting day. We received a metal order with all the metal that we're gonna need to make this offshore bracket for the boat. I borrowed a tube bender in order to make the offshore bracket. The only hang up is a borrowed tool, so we have a limited amount of time to make this offshore bracket. So here's the deal. We're just gonna jump right in. I'm gonna film as much as possible, but we're gonna get as much work done as possible in as little time as possible. And I'm gonna check back in once we make it through the tube bending portion and I feel comfortable with our progress and I can give the tube bender back. So with that being said, let's get some stuff done.
I'm a rocket, I'm over the moon. I'm out of my mind. High above light year, baby. I'm in a galaxy far, far away. I'm a shooting star. You are my Venus, baby. Let me be your Mars, 'cause it feels so good. Getting high on you and it feels so good. It feels so fine. It feels so good. Getting high on you and I'll never come down.
Good time to check in. I took the transom off the back of the boat so that I could get to all the welds a little bit easier. It's kind of the status. Got all the tubing welded 360 degrees around, so it's time to put some sheet metal on there and encase this frame.
Used to be way down in the dumps. Used to sing the blues. My head and shoulders crumped, staring at my shoes. But your love ignited a flame. You turned my engines on. And I'm an aeroplane heading for the sun, and it feels so good. Getting high on you and it feels so good. It feels so right. It feels so good.
Got the base plate done. The bottom. Looks good. I'm gonna switch over to the actual, I guess, would you still call it the transom? The part that the motors are gonna mount to. Flip this thing over and put that plate on next. You'll notice that I'm cutting all the metal with a skill saw now instead of the plasma cutter I used when I did the transom. The plasma cutter seemed to just aerate the metal a lot, and then I dealt with a lot of contamination once I went back and started welding. So I found out that you can actually get an aluminum, I guess it's carbide, but it's for cutting aluminum to cut these sheets out, and it's going way better. Super clean cuts, easy to weld after it's done.
Got the back plate and the bottom plate completely welded in. The side plates are tacked in. But I think I can do the rest of this work with this transom in place, and it would make me feel better if it was attached to the boat. So I'm going to attach it to the boat. Let's see how that balances. It's a new day, time to do some riveting. Doing solid bodies. I've already done a bunch of these, as you can see, so kind of getting the hang of it. Basically just goes, make sure your drill bit's tight, and then drill the hole out. I'm going a little bigger than we were last time, since not all the holes were perfectly circles still after drilling them all out. So now we got 1/4 inch rivets. Put your rivet in. Get it to go in. Got this bucking bar that you put on the back side. If you're lucky, you can reach it. Yeah. It's been a lot of work, but I've gotten through most every rivet. Got it all down here. Looks pretty good. Still got a couple more I have to get. It's just that they're blind, so I'll have to get some blind rivets instead of the solid body ones. But pretty close to mounting motors. So I left the camera off for a few steps. No big deal though, you didn't miss too much. Mainly, I added some supports for the transom. And the other thing I did is I put some primer down on just this back part and the bottom. That way I could paint it and maybe get to the point of putting motors on, which I would like to do. We'll see though. This primer is still tacky because that's when you're supposed to apply the bottom paint, allegedly. So, trying to be very gentle and hopefully it doesn't tear off once I pull that tape. Because that would suck. It's not really that big a deal if we get a little bit of creep, because there's still some paint that's going to go up here, but I'd like to have some semblance of a line and also hopefully not too bad of a texture issue when I go to put my paint on. It's pretty thin stuff, surprisingly, for bottom paint. Just finished my second coat. Yeah, that did all right. A little bit of primer sticking to the tape, but it's definitely staying on the metal. And that actually worked significantly better than I thought it would. Nice. All right. Like I said, I still gotta paint up here the actual finish coat because this is just primer, but at least I have a line to work with now. Started raining, so we're in a teepee now. Boop boo boop boop ba doo boo. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for me. All right, so for anyone interested in the material selection for the painting part of the boat, we just did a small part, but I think I got it kind of figured out as far as what we're going to do through the entire project. To start with, to get anything to really bond to bare aluminum, you have to start with a etch. So this is an aluminum etch. You want to read the instructions that are on the back and on Total Boat's website. They have a whole bunch of materials, but also information on there. Go and check out their website for boat painting, fiberglass, all kinds of stuff like that. Anyway, aluminum boat etch. You basically put it on there and scrub it on with a Scotch-Brite. You let it sit for a little bit, but you don't want to let it dry. And then you spray it off and dry it off. And then you have basically I want to say like a 30-minute or an hour window that the aluminum oxide has been broken off of the aluminum and you can paint it. That's essentially what we're trying to get off of the boat is the aluminum oxide because that's going to keep the paint from adhering to the bare aluminum. If the aluminum's already painted, you can skip this step, but if you're painting on bare aluminum, then you're going to want to do an etch. I think you can technically probably sand the aluminum too and break off the aluminum oxide and then paint over that. But this is what I chose to do. It seemed to work pretty good. I could see it working. I could see the aluminum looked different after I put this on there. And then I was able to move on to my next step. After you get your etch on there is on the bare aluminum, you're going to need some primer. And so this is a 2-part epoxy aluminum primer. You do want to be careful what you use on aluminum. Certain paints have different metals within them that'll mess with the aluminum or cause corrosion issues. So just be sure you do your research before you select anything. So Total Boat also makes a primer that's specifically for aluminum. It's a 2-part. You basically paint it on there like you saw me do. And it helps with adhering to the aluminum, and then also I think is kind of a protectant, 2-part epoxy protectant to keep the corrosion issues from happening if you have your boat in, say, salt water. Moving on from there, I did anti-fouling bottom paint, also from Total Boat. The instructions online, how I was saying, there's a bunch of wealth of information on Total Boat as far as all these materials go. Actually gives you a step-by-step process of using these 3 products I've showed you so far and the timing of how you're going to do that. And so actually, like I said, you put this on, you have about an hour to put this on. And then while this is still tacky, you want to be able to basically put your thumb against the primer and leave a thumbprint. It's soft, but it's not coming off on your thumb and sticking to your thumb. And once you get to that point, you can actually put your anti-fouling paint right over the top of that. And that helps the anti-fouling paint adhere to your primer to where you're not going to deal with any issues with layer separation between those 2 layers. You'll notice this also says aluminum. And that is actually important because it says like here that it's copper free. I'm assuming that maybe regular bottom paint is going to have copper in it.
as the biocide to keep the moss and stuff from the bottom of your boat. And the copper probably somehow interferes with the aluminum, and you'll end up with some kind of galvanic corrosion. So the bottom paint, just like the primer, you'll want to make sure that it is safe to use with aluminum. So, and last you saw that I put kind of a gray top paint on there. Total Boat does sell top paint. I did not go with one of their products because I already had something that I've used before on an aluminum boat. The only difference is, so this is PPG Durethane. It's also a two-part urethane, I think. I don't think it's an epoxy. You can look it up if you're interested. I already had some of this, and so I decided to use it. The only difference was it wasn't part of their process that they had outlined on Total Boat's website. So instead of just putting it straight over the tacky primer, I was worried that maybe the two products would interfere with each other or not mix well. I actually waited for the primer to dry all the way, cure completely according to the directions and how long it says it takes to cure on that two-part epoxy primer. And I then sanded it and put this stuff over the top. So yeah, those are the products going on for the paint. All right, it's another day. The boat's back on the side yard. The motors are attached with one bolt each. Success, we have motors on our boat. Let's talk about those motors real quick, because as you saw when I installed them, they are Force motors. They're Force 120s to be exact. And if you know anything about outboard motors, you'll know that not a lot of people have good things to say about Force outboards. I think some of that's well-deserved. I think some of it's not. Let's just go over it real quick and then we'll move on. So Force, a little bit of a backstory, was essentially created by Bayliner's parent company. Essentially, what Bayliner decided to do, or Bayliner's parent company, is that when the Chrysler motor division was essentially going out of business, they bought that motor division. They took all of their designs and intellectual property, and they basically just took all that and made the Force outboard motor. So they put no R&D into actually creating their own motor. They just essentially took a decade-old Chrysler motor design. They put some new cowlings on it to make it a little newer, and then they put it out there. Eventually, Mercury acquired Force, so it ended up being Force by Mercury, but not a lot changed from what I understand with the mechanical design with the motor. Essentially, it was just some of the auxiliary parts ended up getting Mercury bolt-ons because, you know, Mercury was already manufacturing those parts, and it made more sense for some of that than to continue trying to manufacture old Chrysler parts. So past the backstory, some of the criticism that these force motors get, one, the bigger block motors, like the 150 horsepower and up, I guess were well known to blow up. So I think that's why you don't see a lot of them out there on Marketplace. Essentially what you're gonna see on Marketplace is a lot of 90s, a lot of 120s, because I think that's what didn't blow up. And you don't see a lot of the 150s. And I think they made a 200 or a 225 too, and you don't see a lot of those either. So just judging on the motors that I see on Marketplace and the frequency that I see them, maybe the fact that they're big block motors are unreliable, that may be well-deserved, and the evidence would be that I don't see a lot of them. I don't know though, because that's not what I was looking at, so I didn't research it a lot. Past that, people say that their electronics were old and unreliable. I've had 2 Force outboard motors before that, and I never ran into any of electronics issues. And past that, there's not a lot of electronics in these motors anyway. It's basically like coil packs and a pickup for the spark plug timing. So that could be well-deserved. I'm not really sure. I've never run into that. But even if it is, the electronics are so minimal on these motors, I'm not too worried about that, but I'll keep an eye on it. Past that, they never really leveled up or improved their design in any significant way. They started, as all outboard motors were at the time, as a simple carbureted 2-stroke that had no oil injection. As the other brands moved on and started introducing the oil injection, the fuel injection, and such into their designs, Force did not. They basically just had a design, they stuck with it. It was just an old, simple design. And so as far as the drawbacks go with these motors, avoid the big ones. Maybe the electronics are a little susceptible to failure, and they have old tech in them. As far as the benefits for me for these motors are, one, you can find them for super cheap. I got this pair of motors for $800. That's fantastic for a cheap boat project. The other benefits for me are the same as the drawbacks, actually, in a way, is that they are simple motors, and I was never going to be able to afford a newer motor for this boat. It was always going to be an older motor. So if I'm going to be buying 30-year-old outboards, honestly, I'd just much prefer to be an old carbureted, as simple as it gets motor with an old design, much rather than dealing with the electronics that are involved in 30-year-old fuel injection. I don't hate fuel injection. I think it's great. I had a 30-year-old Mercury EFI for a long time that was a super reliable boat, but also every time I opened the cowling and looked at all the little computer boxes and stuff like that, it always made me nervous that one day a capacitor was going to blow up one of those boxes, that I wouldn't be able to diagnose it, and that it'd be hard for me to fix myself. So for me, for a DIY guy, for a guy that can only afford 30-year-old motors on this project, an old carbureted Force motor, the small block version, ends up being, I think, perfect for me. And, you know, like I said, I've had them before. I've never had problems. I hope that's going to be the case here, but we'll see. All right, now that we're past me justifying why I bought a motor that everybody hates, we're going to move on to the next step of fully mounting these outboards onto the offshore bracket by adding essentially a distance piece within that square tubing on the transom in order to keep the 2 ends of the transom from sucking up to each other when we tighten that bolt. So essentially, we're going to drill out a hole from the inside of the transom. We're going to stick this distance piece in there. We're going to weld it in and then grind it down, make it look all nice, put the bolt through there. And then when we tighten it up, there's some structure there for the bolt tab clamping force without deforming the aluminum. So let's go do that. one down. I've actually already done 2, 4, 6, including the one I just did. I only have these 2 left. So all those are welded in from one side. That may or may not be as far as I'm gonna go. We'll see. It would undoubtedly be better if I welded this side as well to just completely close those holes in. That would be nice. I do actually have to take each of these motors off to move them up one hole. When I moved this one down and measured how far this cavitation plate is above the bottom of the boat, we're actually below it by about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, which is not what I want. I want it at least even with the bottom of the boat, or I want this above the bottom of the boat by about a 1/2 of an inch. I only have 2 holes here, so I don't actually have a ton of extra adjustment on these force motors, but moving it up one will get me at least an inch upward and bring that cavitation plate to about 1/4 of an inch above the bottom of the boat, which that'll probably work. That'll be fine. So when I do that, I may weld this side of each one of those spacers. I may not. I haven't really decided yet. I don't think it needs it, but if I'm gonna have the motors off anyway, I kind of might as well. But we'll see. I don't know. Depends on if I'm feeling like redoing the paint around the welds or not. All right. Well, if I'm being honest, I'm not super stoked about having to hoist these motors again to address this height issue. But here we are. Not to mention I don't really want to do more welding. Guess all we can do is take one off and address it. See what we're feeling. All right, let me get the hoist. Honestly, I'm just gonna leave it. It's a spacer, not a structure piece. Some 4200. Let's move on to the second motor. If you're wondering why I went with 2 motors instead of one big motor, well, there's a few reasons. One, I think it's cool to have 2 motors. And 2, I could have 2 motors because I was designing the offshore bracket and I could make it support really whatever I wanted to. And 3, 2 medium-sized outboards was much cheaper than 1 large outboard. From my findings, I knew that I wanted at least like 200 horsepower, maybe 250 horsepower. And I was looking around, the price to find a 250 horsepower outboard is just insane.
So 220 horsepowers seem to have done the trick. And they were cheap. And if I ever want to replace them, they'll also be cheaper than one big motor. Kind of nice. I doubt you want to watch me do the same thing 2 times, so maybe I'll just check in with you when I'm all done with this one. Report back with the height of the old cavitation plate above the transom. Yeah, let's do that.
All right, both motors are officially mounted permanently. This is as high up as the motor is gonna get. So although I'm not super happy with where it ended up, this is what we got. So, so basically, if I put a straight edge on the bottom of the boat, the front of the cavitation plate is about maybe even to a 1/4 inch above the bottom of the boat. And then the back of the cavitation plate is actually below the bottom of the boat. But these are also trimmed all the way down. So I don't actually know how they're gonna end up sitting once I trim them up slightly, like they would be once you're on plane and going. So I think we're all right. I would have liked to probably design this transom just a tad bit higher to where I could have more up adjustment if I wanted it, but here we are. There's nothing I can do about it now. So hopefully this will be all right, and I think it will be. All right, we have no more work that we can do with parts or metal that we have sitting here. So until we buy more stuff, that's a wrap. So we're just gonna wrap up this video now, give you an update where we are on the budget real quick. We started with the budget of $6,500, of course. By the end of the last video, we had $4,250 left of that $6,500. And in this video, we spent some money. We spent $800 on the pair of motors behind me. We spent $443 on aluminum. We spent $100 on argon. And then we spent $192 on the paint to get the transom painted. I don't have all of the paint to do the entire boat. I bought just enough to do the transom so that I could put the motors on and not have to delay that step. So we'll have to buy more of that, but I do have a little bit of all of that. So by the end of this video, sitting here right now, we have $2,715 left of our $6,500 proposed budget on this boat. So things are getting tight. I think we'll be able to get pretty far with that amount of money. We may not be able to buy electronics or any fancy gizmos, but I think we'll be able to get the boat built and on the water. We'll see how that goes though. So that's a wrap.